our next speaker, Amina Peterson, and she's going to talk about uses of the erotic, censorship, and sensual expression in the NFT space. So, Amina, come on out.
Hello. All right. So I thought before I start talking too much about the erotic and sex, that we get the uncomfortable part out the way. So if we could start with a 1-minute meditation. That went quick. And we could start with just a quick breath, right? Let's just take a few breaths in. Sex can be an awkward conversation for some, and so I like to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we get our breath together before we get our emotion ahead of the conversation. So just go ahead and take a breath in your nose. Wide open mouth, exhale. Again. Wide open mouth, exhale. Let your shoulders drop. We've been walking around like this, hiding our phones, hiding our QR codes. One more breath in. Wide open mouth, exhale. I want you to think very quickly about the first time that you learned about sex, especially if there's an instance that you can think of that you learned about how to have sex, how to be intimate with someone, who gets to have sex, when you're supposed to have sex, and why. And I want you to think about this in relationship to this space, because there's all this talk about Web3, and I say all the time that Web 2 would not have been Web 2 without sex. Sex and MapQuest. That we needed those things to come to bring people in. And one of the things that happened with the internet, and I've been online since my mom was bringing computers back from the college in the late 80s and early 90s. And so one of the things that used to happen is that there was places that you would stumble upon sex. It wasn't very intentional. It couldn't be, because laws and puritanical ideas have kept it out of the main space. Unfortunately, under the guise of protection of children. Not that children don't need protection, but it hasn't worked. And we are in a unique space here in the NFT world, where we are seeing images, we are seeing art and creativity being expressed in a platform that can include the erotic, that includes sex and sensuality, that includes the body. And so I want you to just kind of think about, especially for those of you that are young enough to have grown up with the internet. I was already doing things sexually when the internet came out. So for those of you that are young enough to have grown up with that, to really think about what that's looked like. And think about where you learned about it, because I think that's really important. This is my work. I'm Amina Peterson, also known as Goddess Amina. I am the director and founder of the Atlanta Institute of Tantra and Divine Sexuality. I train sexological body workers, sexologists, and other sex practitioners, sex therapists, sex coaches, psychologists, gynecologists. I do a lot of work coaching pleasure-based sex education. And I use a variety of resources, including now NFTs, to propel sex to the front space, intimacy to the front space, the erotic to the front space. And I'm not anti-porn, I love porn, but I am not one that works in pornography. I work in the erotic space. And so I think it's really important to note the difference, because there's a lot more right now, we're seeing a lot more sexuality expressed in NFTs, and there will be debates that will show up about where that's supposed to go. But there's conversations that might not be at the forefront of your mind. Like, where does the next generation learn about sexuality, about the way that their bodies will experience sex and pleasure? Where is that at? Not just the young generation, because most of my clients are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they're still learning about sex. They're still learning about genitalia. They're still learning about pleasure, because we got one lesson: that not to get sick and not to get pregnant. Because I grew up in the HIV epidemic, and that was really important. So as I said, they told me not to hit it twice because you'll go for it. I work with therapists, I work with doctors, I've trained teachers, sex surrogates, and I work with everyday folks just like you. And I think that's really important to understand because I'm not just training the professionals. We all have access to this. But there's something that's in our way. And there's something that I don't think, and I wasn't sure if I should be in this track or in the legal track for this talk. Because one of the things that is in the way, that in 2018 there was a law that was passed, there were 2 bills that were passed, and maybe you've heard of them, SESTA and FOSTA, but they will impact the work that you have in so many ways. And as we watch now with regulations coming down, and they're trying to really regulate the money because they don't know what to do with that, but they're also, as we are posting images and sharing images and information online, when we see the erotic, we must know that the government it has already regulated, has already deemed what we can and cannot do. And so decentralized spaces, decentralizing art, creativity, using the NFTs for purposes beyond just art, because there's so much more utility to it, allows us to really express the erotic and display the erotic beyond the pornographic and into the space where we are educating and showing up and offering people a chance to learn more about their bodies. This is a quote from Audre Lorde, that the erotic has been misnamed by men and used against women, that we have taken the language of pornography and the idea of pornography so that when we see a project or we see something that is artistic, but it has the body in it, especially if it's genitalia, then we automatically think that there's something wrong with that. And not us, because we know better than that, but the powers that be do. And unfortunately, with that being said, there will be moments in the very near future where this gets regulated. It's already regulated. And I am here because I wanted to have a conversation, to initiate conversations, and to remind people to initiate those conversations in their own circles. Sex work wasn't the only work that was harmed by SESTA and FOSTA online. Professions like mine and any profession, artists that were creating art that had nothing to do with selling sex, were also disenfranchised from the internet. Sites that were feeding artists, that would allow you to work, have been shut down. And so since many of us we will host our NFTs on a platform like OpenSea or Nifty or wherever, we're advertising them on websites that are hosted by other places so that people can connect their wallets and link through. And those websites are at risk of being shut down because of SESTA and FOSTA. And because of the Earn It Act, which is a new act that was just passed. This is a lot of information. And in a very short time. But if you are not familiar, I would like for you to write down SESTA, FOSTA, and Earn It. Those are the 3 acts. SESTA and FOSTA were passed in 2018. Earn It was passed this year. I think so? Yeah, this year. And SESTA and FOSTA the goal was to eliminate sex trafficking. That is not what it did. In fact, it shoved sex trafficking under the ground. Of course, we all want sex trafficking to end. We can all agree that we're on that same page. We also are in this decentralized space, in this space where we're saying we're kind of creating a new place for us. We also have to think about and be able to create space for sexual and erotic expression in other ways and have it protected. It is a form of freedom of speech that we have lost in Web 2, and Web 3 has created a space for us to go in and see so much more, to share so much more, and to create a space where we are learning about our own bodies. Our bodies are empowering. The way that we are able to experience life is humanity, it's humanizing, it's empowering. Taking that away from us and taking that away from even younger folks as well. I'm in my 40s, but I have nieces and nephews that are in their teens and younger, and my nibblings they're important. Their access to true pleasure-based sex education, honest information about their bodies is important. And the NFT functionality can offer that. They can link them to classes, it can link them to workshops, it can create spaces and communities for them to have conversations that can be monitored. We can use the space and create spaces that actually offer safety for those that we have said are not ready to be exposed to certain types of eroticism, and hold space for ourselves. We can govern ourselves with that information, knowing that we're armed with our own, with information and ready to defend our own freedom in that way. The body politics that we're experiencing in this country are beyond ridiculous right now. And so anyway, I realize that I have so many more words, but I have like 10 more seconds. So I want to stop here. My organization is the Atlanta Institute of Tantra and Divine Sexuality. I've been doing this work for, I started as a sex surrogate about almost 22 years ago. And I've been working in this field for a very long time. If you would like some information, you can find me at ATL Tantra on pretty much every platform. And then I also we had an event on Tuesday, so I have some leftover programs from the event. If you want one, they're here. And you can have one and reach out and get to learn more, create programs in your area, link up with other NFT projects. I know I'm not the only one. I'm seeing them around here. I've been meeting and taking pictures and following, and we're here. So please come look for those projects too, because there is a great need of support. And I know sometimes it could be a little standoffish because it's sex. But please, here, let's just all be adults. Go ahead and talk to them, talk to me, reach out, and create space for eroticism in the NFT space. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amina.